Father, I pray that you would send fresh fire, send a sure word to encourage those who need to be encouraged. Touch those who need a touch. Heal spirit, body, and soul through your word. But most of all, God, I pray today that you would infuse faith, the faith that has already been stirred up in the room. Let it be planted in the hearts of many. In Jesus' name, amen. 2 Kings 20:1, it says, in those days, Hezekiah was sick. In those days. What were those days? Those were the days for Hezekiah, in some sense, of great victory. He had been harassed and threatened by the most powerful nation on earth at the time, Assyria. And God dispatched an angel that went into the camp of the enemy, and 185,000 dead corpses that used to be soldiers were taken care of. God sent an angel to take care of that. Yet in those days, Hezekiah was sick. Hezekiah prayed. He prayed fervently for the remnant. Yet in those days, Hezekiah was sick. He reached out to his prayer partner, Isaiah, and said, pray for the remnant. Maybe our God will hear the words of blasphemy that have been spoken by Rabshakeh and Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. And God heard him. And although Hezekiah was sick, and not just a common cold or even the flu, the text says, in those days, Hezekiah was sick and near death. He was sick and near death, but it didn't impact his prayer life. I hope somebody can see this. He prayed until victory came to the remnant in the southern kingdom of Judah, which was only 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. The other 10 tribes had been overtaken by Syria. There were more than them, but they didn't have the might and the power of God. I want you to know that when you've got God on your side, he's more than the enemy that's against you. He's more than enough. But in those days, Hezekiah was sick and near death. And Isaiah the prophet, his prayer partner, who rejoiced with him in victory, God sent that same prophet to give him these words. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, went to him and said to him, thus says the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. Would you consider that a bad report? It's a bad report. Hezekiah's response was, he didn't answer the prophet a word. I heard what you said. I even believe what you said because I know you're a man of God. That's why I sent for you to pray with me. There are other folk I could have sent for, but I know that you can reach heaven. So I heard what you said. I believe what you said is true. And he turned his face to the wall. I'm shutting everything out. It's just me and God. When I was praying for the city, Lord, I was isolated because I was sick. But I called the prophet so I could have a prayer partner, and I went before you. Now it's just you and me. This is personal. I heard the report, but I'm turning my face to the wall. And you look at his prayer, he didn't ask God to heal him. He talked about how he walked upright before me. That's why when I heard that song, Order My Steps, something leaped in my spirit. Lord, order my steps, so that when my days have come to the end of its number, I can say I walked upright before you. I walked before you with a loyal heart. I did what was right in your sight. You can only say that if he's ordered your steps. and you walked in the steps of the Lord. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his ways. And though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, because the Lord upholds him with his hand. Lord, uphold me with your right hand of power. Somebody say, Lord, uphold me with your right hand of power. Order my steps. He turns his face to the wall, and more than pray, he weeps bitterly. He weeps bitterly. And God says, I heard you. I've heard your prayers, and I've seen your tears. God told me to tell you, every tear that you cry, he's an interpreter of tears. The words that you can't say, when you're so sick you can't pray right, when you have so much pain emotionally that you can't get the right words out. You may not be as eloquent as the next person, but I've seen your tears. And I know everything, that I can translate everything from those tears and give you what you need. I've heard and I've seen your tears. Hezekiah turning his face to the wall reminds me of the old church I grew up in, where when people got a bad report, they would literally say, and I know this because they said it in testimony service over and over and over. I heard it so many times, it's seared into my consciousness. The doctor would give them a bad report. It was very bad. He said, Doc, before you give me the test, just let me get to church. If you just let me get to church. And they would stand up in testimony service and communicate that report, almost like Hezekiah did when he laid out the letter from Sennacherib on the altar. Lay it out on the altar, and the saints of God would hear it and begin to cry out. You didn't have to ask them to cry out, because they knew it's our job when we come together to have each other's back. And they would begin to pray. And by the time they go back to the doctor and get the test, there's been a change. Things are different. And next week when they come back, the whole church is on fire. People are shouting, let's get back to that. It's time that you don't stay in isolation with a bad report. This is the place where God assembles us together so that faith can go out. There's some stuff I believe when I'm in your presence that's hard for me to believe when I'm by myself. There's some stuff that we believe because it's faith to faith. It's breast to breast and together. That's why Jesus never sent anybody out by themselves. Because together, you can put 10,000 to flight. I know I can chase 1,000 by myself, but there's so many devils. Sometimes 1,000 is not enough, Pastor Hyacinth. I need at least 2 to put 10,000 to flight. Put him to flight. Put him to flight. And God said to Isaiah, by the time he got to the gate, there are 3 words I want you to hear in verse 4. Go to verse 4. The 3 words are, and it happened. And it happened. I want you to get that in your spirit. And it happened. What happened? Exactly what he prayed for. He didn't even have the words to say it. It happened. I want you to know that somebody, if you got the faith to believe it, it's happening right now for you. It's happening right now for you. In the midst of your tears, you're going to be able to say, and it happened. And it happened. Let those words come out of your mouth. I don't think you're getting it in your spirit. And it happened. And it happened. Come on, let it happen. Let it happen. And it happened. When God speaks a word, it's already past tense. Not that it's happening, and it happened. And it happened. We're not talking about happenstance. We're talking about, and it happened. Somebody said it is so. And happened before Isaiah had gone into the middle court. Isaiah had done what he was to do. He gave the word. He's walking away. God said, go back and tell Hezekiah, the leader of my people, that I've heard his prayer and I've seen his tears. And surely, come on, somebody say surely, I will heal you. Surely, surely, put up verse 5. Surely, come on, say surely. When you get a sure word from God, when you get a sure word from God, it's better than anything you can possess. It's better than the money in your bank account. It's better than the breath you breathe. It's better than anything. A sure word from God. Surely I will heal you. But I want you to do something. On the third day, now remember, Hezekiah is sick unto death. He's in his bed. He got this prophecy from the prophet, from Isaiah, the eagle-eyed prophet, who can see stuff afar off while he's in the bed. And his only posture was to turn his face to the wall. It didn't even say he turned his whole body, because he obviously had some kind of infection. That's why they put the boil on it, Esther. They put a boil. So when you have bed sores, you don't want to turn over because it hurts. But if you can't turn your body, you can turn your face. Turn your face to the wall. Wasn't nothing matter with his prayer life. He prayed to God. He prayed until God heard him. He must have felt isolated, because the one he called on to pray against his enemy, the Assyrians, had now given him that report. And so now he talks to God. God now sends a word back to him. And he says, on the third day you shall go up to the house of the Lord, and I will add 15 years. I'm like, Lord, why did you tell him to go to church? I said, Lord, I don't understand, because in the time that I'm living in, most people, not all people, but most people, when they get sick, they stay home. And it's like, that's natural. They're sick. They're sick. Why did you tell him you're going to heal him surely, but in 3 days I want you to get up to my house? He said, because when he gets in my house, he's going to be able to grab a hold of this thing that like he can't in isolation. He's been laying there. The thoughts in his head are working against him. He's focused on his symptoms. He's focused on his pain. And even though I've given him a word, he doesn't have the faith. There's nothing to stir. It's like trying to stir up. You want to make a cake, but you don't have any batter. You're stirring up what's dry. There's nothing going to come out of that. You got to have something to stir. Is there anything in this room stirring right now? Something has to be there to stir. God has spoken a word. He can do it all by himself. But the material that we supply is faith. 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 Here's how I know that Hezekiah, in spite of the sure word, in spite of the fact that he had already seen great victory, he saw an enemy defeated that he knew he was not strong enough to defeat. He saw that. He saw God do that. Say, I've seen him work. And there are times in our lives where we know what God can do, but when it touches us personally, it gets a little harder. It requires something more sometimes than is within us. But when we assemble together in the house of God and we begin to worship, something happens. And it happened. And it happened. There have been times I've been despondent and sick in body, sick in spirit, and I come into God's house and it happened. And it happened. And it just lifts. I don't even know where it went. I don't know when it went, but all I know, it happened. So God is telling him, I'm giving you a word. My word is good, but I want you to get down to my house. Verse 6. Here's what God says. And I will add to your days 15 years. I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. And I will defend this city for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. Now, in chapter 19 last week, for those of you that were here, you see God did away with them. And Assyria was essentially defeated. Sennacherib went back home in his temple to worship his God, and two of his sons came in, and with the sword they killed them. It's what you would call a coup. And then his two sons had to run away. His third son became king. So, Lord, you've already given him the victory. Hezekiah is not thinking about that. He didn't even ask you about that. Why did you tell him? Because God knows that when he takes you from one level to the next, there's another devil. Paul said, a great door is open unto me in Ephesus with many adversaries. And so God is saying, I got you. Even for the dangers that you don't see, you think you're safe. You think it's just about your body, but that enemy is still lurking. His son, who is now on the throne, is going to come after you expressly because you're one who stood up against his father. Every other nation submitted. I want you to know when you stand up against the devil, he's going to bring more devils. For those who submit, he doesn't fight them. Why should I fight those who submit? But we're at a place in God where we resist the devil. And we know when we resist him, he shall flee from us. We also know when we draw near to God, he'll draw near to us. That's a promise, and we stand on that promise. Let's try to land this plane. Verse 7. Then Isaiah said, take a lump of figs. So they took it and laid it on the boil, the place where the infection was. I'm touching myself here like I know where it was. I have no idea where it was, but I know he had something that was in his flesh. They put the figs on it. That's why although we believe God, we also believe God uses medicine. This, as far as I know, is the first example of medicinal healing in the Bible. He took those figs. God knew what was in the figs. There are people today who healed from cancer and all kinds of stuff by using olive oil. And by using, that's one of the reasons we anoint with olive oil. Look up healing properties of olive oil. The list is so, everything from arthritis. And God gives people the wisdom of how to extract it and how to put it in. Tree barks heal breast cancer. Sand heal other conditions like transplants. Everything that we need is already in the earth. It was in the garden. It was in the garden. That's why I don't believe in invention. I believe in discovery. It's already here. We just have to discover it. And I believe God rejoices when his children discover that what was there. He said, good job. I had that there since Adam. Took you a minute, but you now discovered it. It's for your good. Put the figs on the boil. And look at what it says after that. These three words. And he recovered. This is important. If you don't remember anything else I said, this is for somebody in the room. At that moment, he recovered, but his symptoms persisted, and he didn't know he recovered. So he went back to the prophet, and he said, how am I going to know that the Lord healed me, and that I should go up to the temple to the Lord's house in 3 days? Show me a sign. That's when he said, take it down in a number of degrees. Let the sun go the opposite way. But then after that, the story ends. The story ends. Did that give Hezekiah the faith he needed? I don't know. I think God left that a mystery for us. But what I do know is when God said, surely I'll heal you, it's done. You just have to anticipate it. But now the Bible is going in another tense, Reverend Bracco. It says, and he recovered. Some of you have already recovered and you don't know it. Because like Hezekiah, you're focused on the symptoms. His symptoms were still there. He still felt the boil. He still felt the boil. And when you put the fig on the boil, that doesn't mean it goes away. You know how you put ointment on something? Maybe it stopped itching, but it's still there. He was focused on that. He said, I want you to stop focusing on that. I want you to get to my house because I got some people there. I got some people there who believe me. I got some people there who are going to worship. And when you get in the presence of that, this thing is going to go away before you know it, and you're going to walk away like the lepers who, as they went, the Lord is saying to somebody, as you go, Hezekiah had already recovered, and he didn't know it. It's not because he had no faith. He had the faith to take down the strongest army in the world at the time. But when it touches you, it requires a different kind of faith. And Woody, we need helpers of our faith. And that's why the devil said to God about Job, does he honor you for nothing? You've hedged him all about. You've hedged him about. But let me touch his body, skin for skin and flesh for flesh. He'll curse you to your face. When the devil wants us to doubt God, he touches our flesh because he knows we value that. But when you hear a word from God in the moment it's spoken, it is so, and so it is. You need to walk in that thing. But Hezekiah was asking, how will I know? Let me tell you how you're going to know. Because the Lord said so. It's so easy to say, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. But this case study of Hezekiah, who God says is my leader, he belonged to God. When it gets personal, it gets tough. And in the time of warfare, sometimes it gets personal. And when that happens, when God is looking out for the dangers that are unseen, that we don't even see, that's when we cry out and say, Lord, be a fence. I need you to be a fence. Lord, I'm asking you to be a fence all around me every day. Because, Lord, although I believe you, although I seek your presence, although I desire you, there's some stuff you see that I don't see. I might be focused on the boil. I might be focused on symptoms, and another enemy is rising up. An enemy that I thought I had defeated, Reverend Lynch. I thought I had defeated this enemy. And God said, don't worry, I'm going to defend you against him. Because you've taken your eyes off him. Jesus, be a fence. Be a fence all around me every day. I'm asking you to be a fence.